Welcome to Presidential Fight Club, the show that answers the question, if all 44 presidents fought each other one-on-one, who would win? Hosted by two history professors who have too much time on their hands, Scott Rank and James Early. Welcome to the first fight of round one of the Midwest Regional. We're jumping into the 19th century with Grover Cleveland versus Benjamin Harrison. James, tell us about what Cleveland brings to the fight.
Grover Cleveland grew up the son of a minister, so, he pretty stable family life. He was not particularly wealthy. His father became a home missionary, and they really struggled with income, and so he apprenticed. But it was not a hardworking. It wasn't like a farm apprentice or anything. He worked as a commercial apprentice, whatever that may mean. I guess he worked in a store or something, but he wasn't a particularly athletic young fella. He was fond of outdoor sports, according to some of his neighbors, who they later described him as full of fun and inclined to play pranks and fond of outdoor sports. But he doesn't seem to have had much of an interest in athletics or anything like that. And when it came time for the Civil War, when the Civil War broke out, he was 24 years old, and he did not join the Union Army. He hired a substitute. So he wasn't much of a fighter. One thing that he does bring to the table is obviously a great, first of all, he's not afraid to inflict pain on people. He worked as the sheriff of Erie County, New York, and it is said that on occasion when someone was sentenced to death, that Cleveland himself as sheriff would pull the lever that caused the person to be hanged to death, which was not something that was required. It wasn't part of the job description, wasn't necessary, but he did it. He felt like if he was called to enforce the law, then he should do that from time to time. He shouldn't be ashamed of it. And another thing that's interesting about Cleveland is he was not, I started to say earlier, he was not completely impervious to pain, but he was pretty tough when it came to pain. He had a secret surgery when he was president. Of course, that would have been much later than the 35-year age that we're doing this at, but still, it shows a little bit about his character. He had surgery done for oral cancer on a boat, and
great place for surgery, right?
Oh yeah, because that's where I want to go next time I have to have surgery. And it was, he's just trying to keep it hushed up and make sure the American people did not know about it, because he didn't want people to be concerned about his health and accuse him of being weak or anything like that. So they gave him a little bit of ether and a little bit of the very primitive anesthesia. We're a little bit past the age of just giving him some brandy and bite on a bullet or something, but still, he was somewhat anesthetized, but they went in and they cut out a giant cancerous gelatinous mass, the sources say. And so that's pretty tough. He was also a big guy. He was 5'11", so not super tall, but he weighed about 260. When he was 35, I'm sure he was a little bit younger than that. And so if he could get his weight into a punch, he would really pack a punch. But that's all I've got for Cleveland.
Well, my man is Benjamin Harrison, who is the grandson of William Henry Harrison. So we don't have a grandfather-grandson duo like we did with John Adams versus John Quincy Adams. But with Harrison, there's an interesting dynamic with Cleveland. Now, first of all, there's a size dynamic. Cleveland, like you said, big guy, 260, 270 when he's in office, whenever. He served two different times. Harrison is about 100 pounds lighter. He's only about 5'6", much smaller guy. He's also literally sandwiched in between Cleveland in terms of his presidential terms. Cleveland had 1885 to 1889 and 1893 to 1897. Harrison is right in between those two. So, James, like you mentioned, Cleveland paid his way out of the Civil War. Harrison was a brigadier general, and he commanded an infantry brigade at a lot of battles of New Hope Church, Marietta, Peachtree, Atlanta. And whatever Harrison can bring to the battle, he's a lot smaller, but when he thought he was on the right side of a cause, he was called an iceberg by some people. He was cold. Theodore Roosevelt called him cold-blooded. He was stubborn. He would be, let's call him an immovable object. If Cleveland is the unstoppable force, then he could be the immovable object. So he is, in terms of mental sharpness, in terms of believing that he would be on the right in a fight, he brings a lot to it. When he did fight in the Civil War, he raised the 70th Indiana Infantry and served as their colonel. He did this despite having no military experience, but he was very strict on discipline and earned the respect of soldiers that way. In terms of his actual physical ability, there is one story where in his 50s or so, apparently it goes that a drunken man broke into the White House, and I don't know how true this is or not. I'm not sure. This is before Secret Service detail. There would have been some sort of protection, but I don't know how thorough it was around the White House. And 2 doormen attempted to subdue him, but failed. And Harrison took him down and pinned both arms to his side and tied him up with a cord despite being in his late 50s. He was also tough when it came to conflict with other nations. At one point, there were 2 American sailors who got into a saloon brawl in Chile and died because of it. And he demanded reparations from Chile and a public apology, which he got. So this is what I think that he brings to the fight to Cleveland. Now, is he victorious? James, who wins this first battle?
Well, according to the voters of American History Fanatics, this one was pretty close. It's a close matchup. You've got a non-military man versus a military man, but you have a great big non-military man versus a tiny little military man. They both have a little bit of toughness in them for sure. Harrison, I think, got a few punches in the kneecaps to Cleveland, but Cleveland in the end overcomes Harrison just due to his sheer size advantage, if nothing else.
And I think that there could be a personal anger here because...
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, Cleveland basically had the election stolen from him because, Harrison lost the popular vote to Cleveland, but likely only won the Electoral College. This is the great age of New York corruption party bosses that really isn't cleaned up till Chester A. Arthur. So Cleveland probably has a lot of personal anger running through his veins that could give him that extra push.
I think so.
Well, all right, here we are. So this is the first winner in the first round of the Midwestern Regional. The next fight we have coming up is Harding versus McKinley. Thanks for listening to Presidential Fight Club. If you'd like to download your own printable bracket sheets for each regional tournament so you can guess how the tournament will go, check out presidentialfightclub.com. We'd appreciate it if you could rate and review us on Apple Podcasts as well. Thanks for listening, and may you fight with the stamina of Teddy Roosevelt, the courage of George Washington, and the reach of Abraham Lincoln.